We ended last week in chapter 5 with the little note that says, "And Noah was 500 years old and begot Shem, Ham, and Japheth." In chapter 6 it says, "Now it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I've made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord." The next verse goes into the genealogy of Noah, and there are other pertinent things that if you read this, you would know. If you didn't, I urge you to go back and read it, and then next week you need to read chapter 7 as we continue to go forward. I want to talk to you today about the discovery of grace. There are some points of interest. Before I share with you the things that I found interesting, if you didn't read it, if you just listened to what I just read, are there any points in there that you found interesting out of what I just read? What was interesting to you? How God, according to this, wants to commit genocide. It's a good point. We're going to address that too. What else? Nothing? Nothing interesting? Nothing stood out? The sons of God? Is that was a point of interest? I had that as one of the points of interest. The sons of God. What does that mean? The sons of God saw the daughters of men. What does that suggest to you? What does that tell you? Women are hot. Yeah, that's right. That's a good point. And if I was a woman, I'd probably make that same declaration. Actually, the point of interest I had was there's a higher order of being. There was a higher order of being, obviously, in this story. There were beautiful women. That was my second observation. And the result of the marriage of these sons of God and daughters of men resulted in giants that became renowned in their day for their feats of whatever. I don't know. We don't know. Every time we read a chapter, I don't know if this strikes you or not, but it does me, that there's far more that we don't know than we do know. There's so much left out of here that after a while, I think, this is my thoughts. There has to be an underlying message here that has nothing to do with academics. Because if this is about academia, there's not enough information. There's just no way to draw a cohesive, logical academic conclusion from this. This cannot be what this story was written for. It could not have been written so that we would know who these sons of God were, and these girls, who were their parents. What was it? We don't know. So that can't be the purpose of this writing. The other thing is that what I find really interesting is that this is written obviously after the fact. So the author is going back. Where did he get this information? Where did the author get this information? Is it from folklore? Is it from something he read? You know, the fundamentalist Christians have kind of force-fed us with this idea that, oh, there was, you know, these holy men were sitting in a place and divine mind was pouring through them and they were writing. Listen, I'm not making light of that. I'm telling you that we have to have a broader view of this, or we get so discombobulated in trying to ferret out what is the message. If this is a book from God to man, what is the message that God wants me to get? It can't be detail, because there's no detail here. There has to be a message in here that matters to me if divine mind intended for me to receive from this book. Now, here's some more of my logic, my rationale. I shared with you a few Sundays ago, this book is the best-selling book in the globe and has been for years and years and years. It outsells all the bestsellers combined by a lot. This is a story that is primarily about the Jewish people, for the Jewish people. On the way here, I was having Jan do because some thoughts came to my mind. How many of you know that Hollywood was founded by Jews? And it's always been intimated that the Jews own Hollywood. How many of you understand that as a sect of the human population on the globe, the Jewish people are one of the smallest sects, and yet they have some of the most power. They have the most power financially. They have the most power artistically. I can only come to one conclusion, that how they have based their lives has been on this, what we call the Old Testament. And they have, but I'm telling you, I've talked to rabbis, I've read rabbis. They do not go into here and get academics. They go in and get the metaphor. And they spend hours developing the story underneath the story. If you doubt me, go and read writings that have been done by any rabbi. Pick a rabbi and read their writings. The Jews do not believe in a place called hell, because it's not in the Old Testament, just in case you wondered. That is a New Testament idea, and it's been very distorted by fundamentalists. I'm telling you this because if we don't get our minds open, we can't hear from God. I want to hear from God. I want to hear the divine thing in me. I want to hear it. I want to receive from it. I want to converse with it. I believe that's possible. I believe that's what this story is about, actually. And I intend to share that with you. But before I get into that, those of us that have been followers of the teachings of Jesus, you have to start realizing there is a real change in the Jesus message and this Old Testament message. What Daniel just brought up, that according to this, God wants to kill everybody. Do you believe that? Do you believe that God wanted to kill everybody? If he did, then God has made a drastic change. But this is the same book that says, I am the Lord, I change not. There is no change in God. Is this the same God that Jesus came and told us the story of the prodigal son? Where the father stands on the porch and waits for his wayward son to come back. And when he does come back, he forgives him, he loves him, he reclothes him, he reinstates him. Is this the same God that Jesus told the story of the shepherd who left 99 sheep that were safe to go out into the dark to find the one sheep that was lost? Is this the same God that Jesus told us, when you pray, pray, Our Father? Is this the same God that Jesus said, when you see me, you've seen the Father, that was on his knees in front of a woman caught in the act of adultery? Is this the same God that Jesus is telling us about? That said, listen, I know you've heard it all your life, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I'm telling you, it's not like that. If someone hits you, you turn the other cheek. The message of the New Testament is diametrically opposite of the message of this 6th chapter if we are to believe that God intended to kill everybody, if that was the heart of God. But what I want you to understand is the author is going at this from the backside. This has already happened, and the author is trying to put sense to what has happened. How many people to this day, if something goes wrong, they either blame it on God or they blame it on the devil? How many people in our world today still will not take responsibility for their own life and for what's happening in their life? Listen, as much as I've talked to you about this, I find that my default line is to constantly see what caused my problem and not want to look at myself and say, I caused my problem. I still do that. Now, I've gotten a lot faster at saying, it isn't anything else out there. It's me. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. I'm the one. But this has been human nature from as far back as we can go. I don't know if you've ever done any reading about the Lemurian civilization or the Atlantean civilization or the Sumerian civilization. The Lemurians are back 70,000 years ago. Atlanteans not as far back, but like 50,000. The Sumerians are said to be 5,500 years ago. But there are writings from all of these civilizations, apparently. I'm reading them, and it's interesting that they all talk about a cataclysmic activity that took place on the earth. The Atlanteans and the Sumerians in particular reference the flood, which is what we're reading about today. So this flood story's been around for a very, very long time. Based on time and what is written down, this is new. This is a much newer writing about a flood than what exists that archaeologists have actually found. So this is something that apparently happened. Science says it certainly, there's signs that this whole earth was covered with water at one time. So science agrees that this thing must have happened. And then the writings of the Sumerians agree that it happened. The Atlanteans talk about it, and even the Lemurians. Now that's so far back. So how far back, I don't know. But you can't get the chronological order just from reading this, but that's not the purpose of this. There's a message in this chapter that is beyond trying to figure out how old somebody is or how long ago something took place. That's not the purpose. The purpose is just a foregone conclusion. Here's something that happened. And how do we explain that this happened? This is arguably a horrible thing that happened. How many people were living on the earth? We don't know. It just says when men multiplied, when there were lots of them. That it was the idea of the writer that God must have been mad. That God must have gotten angry. There's not really something in here to tell us emphatically that the problem was the people themselves. But did you notice when I read to you that there's this little line in there that says that the thoughts and the intents were only evil? In our world today, we know that there's evil in our world. But nobody would disagree with that, would you? There's some evil in the world. Do you think our world is mostly evil? Or is it mostly good? I think the evidence is overwhelming that it's mostly good. But there's enough evil that we're aware of it. We don't like it. We'd like to get rid of it. But we don't have a condition like what this says. This says that men's thoughts and intents were only evil. But I thought about it a little bit more. And I thought, but what are evil thoughts? Anybody care to help me with that? What are evil thoughts? Do you have evil thoughts? We don't want to talk about it. Are any of your thoughts evil? Are your thoughts predominantly evil? What if we really started becoming introspective? What is an evil thought? Well, let me ask you this. If, as Jesus taught, I am not supposed to make judgment on someone, if I do, is that an evil thought? To make judgment on someone is an evil thought. How much? I want to, don't say this out loud. It's none of our business. It's just your business. But how much of your thoughts include passing judgment on people, places, and things? The moment you see somebody, so I wonder, are our thoughts continually evil? So that we're constantly doing what the greatest guru that has ever been archived, Jesus, said, don't do this. If you do it, it's coming back to you. Whatever you put out is coming back to you. The thoughts and intents were only evil. And then later in the chapter it says, and violence filled the earth. I submit to you today that the conditions described in this chapter were pretty significantly bad. And yet, in this set of conditions, there is this bright place. And if you want to be hard on yourself by examining your thought processes and come away and think, no, well, I wasn't thinking about committing adultery or killing somebody, so therefore my thoughts aren't evil. I was thinking about what I would get so-and-so for Christmas this season coming up, or I was thinking about a birthday gift, and right then somebody passed by that you thought wasn't pretty, and you made a judgment on that person just as they passed by, and then you went back to focusing on the Christmas gift or the birthday gift. And so my thoughts are not evil. My thoughts are about giving. And we excuse ourselves when we're, I think, constantly violating the teachings of Jesus. He said, don't do it. I want to ask you, do you think it's possible? Do you think it's possible to get to where you just stop passing judgment on people? Is it possible? We're so conditioned to it, aren't we? I mean, we're taught from the time, we're already teaching our grandkids to pass judgment on stuff. As soon as you bring children into this world, you immediately start teaching them this and that. You start teaching them things. No, don't do that. Don't think like that. Don't act like that. Don't go there. I'm not telling you don't do that. I'm saying that we're constantly creating a climate for judgment. And if we pass judgment on something, Jesus said, whatever you put out is coming back to you. So I think, listen for me, the best way that I can tell if I'm not thinking right is if I'm thinking something and I stop and think, do I want that to come back to me? And if I don't want it to come back to me, then I start thinking, I need to stop thinking like that. You think that'll work? If you're thinking in a line of thought and you don't want to eat it, you don't want it to come back to you, then interrupt that thought, Replace that thought with a thought of something that you do want to come back to you. Now, I don't know if you think I'm just out in la-la land, but I think that's what this 6th chapter is about. I believe that you can find historically, and again, you may find something totally different, but I've done some research and reading, and I'm not going to bore you with a lot of in the weed stuff here today. But know this, that it seems that throughout history, if there were real tumult in the society in a given country, there seemed to be weather patterns that correlated with that particular emotional conflict. If you ever read about war, particularly during the Civil War, once that thing got going and there was a lot of firing going on, it rained all the time. They just were constantly fighting in the rain. Now, science says that the gunpowder and everything set the conditions, for this. There seems to be correlation in how the earth operates and how men think. Now, that tells me that there's some real truth in Genesis chapter 1 that says, I'm going to give man authority and dominion over the earth, over all things. Listen, what is the thing happening in our politics right now with regard to climate change? There's people that are just poo-pooing it. There are other people that say 90-something% of scientists say that climate change is a real thing, and it is happening in conjunction with the way people are acting. Yes or no? This is not a far-fetched thing that I'm sharing with you. But this is not new. This was happening way back here in Genesis chapter 6 in the story that we don't know a lot of detail, but when men started thinking in a way that was adverse to themselves, I'll submit to you this morning, and I'll go into it in much more detail next week. The earth itself is a being. It's an energetic being. It's intelligent. It has a life of its own. And we were put here on it to work in harmony with it. But if we work against ourselves, we work against the planet. These people, apparently, in this story, were so working against themselves that they brought about their own destruction. But in hindsight, the only thing that people that don't understand these things know to say is that God must have been mad. That there's a God being out there somewhere that's saying, I'm not going to put up with you anymore. I found it interesting that it says that my spirit will not strive forever with man. His days will be 120 years. At first glimpse, I thought he's saying that now there's going to be this change and people are only going to live to be 120 years old. That's not what it's saying. And it took me a little bit to figure it out, but it's putting all the pieces together. Because when we get past this, Noah lived 350 years after the flood. And many people lived long, long time. So the 120 years was not about the lifespan of people. It was about a countdown to the flood. I'm telling you this, you're getting this intuition from divinity that something catastrophic is going to take place. And I'm giving you 120 years heads up. So when we put all this together, we find out that somewhere around 120 years is when the flood actually took place from this point, from the chronological order of the Scripture, and we'll see that more as we go forward. The conditions were that men's thoughts and their intentions were evil. And there was violence that filled the earth. Thankfully today, violence does not fill our earth. So from that I would extrapolate this. We must be doing better in our thought processes because the whole earth is not full of violence. It's full of goodness and there are pockets of violence. But here, it was full of violence. If we get past a tipping point, I submit to you that if we think in ways that are adverse to ourselves en masse, the earth will join us. And things will happen that will cause the destruction of this species. And listen, many people are thinking about this, and whether they're thinking about it in the right way or not, I don't know. But it's undeniable that a broad spectrum of the people on this planet are concerned about how they're acting as it relates to Mother Earth. That's not a new thing. That's a very old thing. But here's something I want to encourage you with. No matter how bad the conditions, you may have conditions in your job, in your home, in your life somewhere right now that you think, these are really tough conditions for me. These are really bad conditions. I want you to know that in the worst of conditions, you still have the ability to think right. The steps of a right-thinking man are ordered by the Lord. There are no accidents in God. Everything fades into and comes out, emerges out of and fades back into God, into the divine matrix, into the field of the infinite field of energy. That's spiritual, that's scientific, it's undeniable. But right thinking in a negative environment produces good results. According to our story, everybody but one was thinking in a way that was not good for them. And there was one guy named Noah that was not thinking like everybody else. So I want to encourage you, don't follow the herd. If you know that the herd is not thinking right, don't think like the herd. Think on your own. Do your own thinking. And think right in the face of blatant wrong. Don't let others influence you to negativity. Don't do it. When you act in that way, you will be acting as Noah acted. And when Noah acted this way, he found that he was not able to get his direction from the outside. I want to submit to you today that you cannot find truth out here. You can only find truth in here. And that's the reason why Jesus said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. Who is? I am. Where is I am? I am is the power that is energizing this being that you see standing in front of you. The answer is not in this being, it's in the I am that energizes this being. The answers are not out here. I want to tell you, the answer for our country is not in politics. All this political tumult and turmoil right now, this is indicative of things that have happened over and over and over. And there are people who are placing their whole future on who's going to be president next. And I'm going to tell you right now, it don't matter. I care who's president at a lower level. But above that level, I'm telling you right now, no matter who's president, I'm going to think right, I'm going to talk right, I'm going to walk right, and I'm going to live right, and I'm going to have right. That gave me chills because that is right. Whenever you think right, you think in a way that brings good to you. If you feel like you're trapped in a situation that is so negative that your physical eyes cannot see a way out of it, I'm challenging you this morning, start thinking right. When you think right, here's what happens. You find something we call grace. That's what Noah did. He thought right in the face of all the wrong thinking, and he found grace. Grace is a wonderful word. As a matter of fact, think about all the things that grace connotes to us. Grace connotes the idea of royalty or nobility. Right? Your grace. Grace connotes the idea of gratitude, being thankful. I want to tell you that being thankful is one of the most powerful things you can bring into your life experience. When Jesus was faced with 15,000 people that were hungry and he only had 2 fish and 5 loaves, you know what he did to make it be more? He gave thanks. He said grace. He found grace when the numbers were overwhelming. I'm telling you, if you are overwhelmed by circumstance, if you will begin to be thankful for what you have, it will begin to multiply until it will become more than what's against you. Grace is a word that speaks of favor. Favor. I have favor. I have grace. He conducted himself. She conducted herself with grace. Grace, the word grace has to do with good conduct. I want to find grace. How about you? I want to find that He hath made us to be kings and priests unto God. That's grace. That's royalty. That's nobility. I want to know that I am living in thankfulness, in grace. I want to know that I'm in favor with divine mind, that I am in a state of grace. I want to know that I'm walking in grace, that my conduct is good and reliable. This story in chapter 6 teaches us that grace exists in the worst conditions imaginable. And not only does it exist, but according to Romans chapter 5, verse 20, it abounds. That the worse things get, the more grace there is. For where sin abounds, grace did much more abound. That grace was not a New Testament discovery. Noah discovered it way, way back before the flood happened. And because of this discovery, it provided a way out. For by grace are you saved through faith. And that's not even of yourself. It's just a gift from God. Are y'all in this place with me today? Grace has always been, has always existed. It's not a New Testament idea, but thank God Jesus came and helped us to get our mind on grace, because too many people were thinking like everybody else. And Jesus came and stood in front of everybody else and said, I know you've been thinking like this, an eye for an eye, but I'm telling you, don't think like that anymore. I'm telling you to stop resisting evil. Are y'all still with me? There is a Jesus message that is so powerful that it not only has divided time into AD, BC, but it has separated good from evil in a way that makes us understand there is a place above it. That's why Jesus said, be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. I live above this and that. I am not subject to this and that. Shall we pay our taxes? He said, well, do the children owe taxes if the king is the one issuing the tax? The answer is no. But so you don't offend them, so that you're not putting yourself at odds as you walk through this world. Go do what you love to do. Peter, what do you love to do? I love to fish. He said, go fishing. The first fish you catch, take it to the market. It'll be worth enough. Go pay your tax and pay mine while you're there. Is that a good way to think? There is a way to live that is above the hardness of this and that. But way back here, they didn't know it. Even though there were beings of a higher order that had come and joined themselves to the human being. This has been forever. The Sumerians talk about these beings. The Atlanteans talk about these beings. The Lemurians talk about these beings. You say, well, is it true? Let me ask you this. Did you hear the news? Is it true? Every time I see breaking news, I look at it and think, I wonder if that's true. Do y'all? It's like, what can you believe anymore? What does that tell you? This story is about that. What can you believe anymore? You can't find the answer out here. You got to find the answer in here. Noah got quiet enough that divinity started talking to him and said, you know, what these people are doing is creating something that you have a way out of. You do not have to go the way of all these people. So I want you to build an ark. And it's going to be big enough for you and your family, your sons and their wives. And it's going to take you up. There's a way up and there's a way out. And it's by grace. For by grace are you saved through faith. What do you believe? Do you believe all the bad stuff? Or do you believe the good news? Do you believe that you can think better and live better? If you think that way, then you're living that way. If you're living that way, your light is shining. And other people want to know, now what are you doing that I'm not doing? And when they ask you, they're on your turf. And you can tell them the Jesus message. Is there an amen in this house? And if you will share that, you're sharing the gospel. What is the gospel? It's the good news. It's that God is good. God's not mad at you. God is for you. God is not against you. God has given you life. God has not pronounced a death sentence on you. But I'm not mad at the writer of this because he didn't know. That's the way he saw God. That's the way he saw the unfolding of things. Listen, you can see it that way too. But if you do, you're going to live like that. I urge you, don't see God as a killer. See God as the source of life. Don't see God as a damner. See God as a redeemer. See God the way Jesus came to show us God. And don't buy into this. Are y'all okay? Am I messing you up or am I encouraging you to live higher? That's why Jesus came. If Jesus wouldn't have come and this is all we had, we'd all be in a mess. But he came and said, there's a better way. There's a higher way. I am come that you might have life and that you might have it more abundantly. I am the way. That's good. I am the way. Say, how do I get out of here? The answer is in you, darling. How do I get out of this mess? The answer is in you. And what is the answer? Say it with me, I am the way. We understand we're not bragging on this physical body we're walking in. We're bragging on God. Let my soul make her boast in the Lord. The humble will hear thereof and be glad. Oh, magnify the Lord with me. How do you magnify infinity? You can't make infinity bigger, but you can make God bigger in your mind, in your life, in your experience. I urge you, make God bigger than your problems. Don't give your attention to your problems. Give your attention to God. This is apparently what Noah did. He gave his attention to God, and God, grace, gave him a way out. And I'm telling you, this story is still relative. God will give you the way out. Amen? I'm done. Are y'all good? Chapter 7 is going to be good. Don't miss it.